The tent smelled like antiseptic and fear, which Milo had decided a long time ago were basically the same smell wearing different coats. He knelt beside the cot, checking the strap on Kira's wrist for the third time that hour, not because it needed checking, but because his hands needed something to do that wasn't shaking. "You're doing the thing," Kira said. Her voice came out thin, stretched over something brittle underneath it. "The lecture face, I can feel it building." "I don't have a lecture face." "You have several. This is the one before the one about Marduk slaying chaos and putting it in order, which somehow always ends with you telling me to eat my vegetables." "Marduk's a good story," Milo said, which was not a denial. Kira laughed, and it turned into a cough halfway through. The cough turned into something worse, a dry, grinding sound, like stone shifting against stone. For one full second, her left hand did not look like a hand. It looked like a sculpture of a hand, gray and glassy at the knuckles, veins of translucent crystal creeping toward her wrist before she clenched her fist and forced it back into flesh through sheer will alone. Milo did not flinch. He had trained himself over months not to flinch, because flinching told people the truth before you were ready to say it out loud. 67%, she said, reading his face anyway because she always could. "Give or take, Priya checked this morning. You're not dying today." "No," Kira agreed. "Today I'm just turning into a very expensive-looking paperweight, one knuckle at a time, different thing entirely." He wanted to tell her that everything happens for a reason, that suffering forges character, that the crystallization eating her from the fingers inward was somehow cosmically a lesson. And he hated himself for wanting to, because it would have been a lie dressed up as wisdom, and Milo had exactly one rule he'd never broken. He did not lie to make himself feel better. He would tell a hard truth badly before he told a soft lie well. So instead he said, "You have a month, maybe 2 at this rate. I'm going to use every day of it." "Doing what?" "You've got one trick, Peterson. You touch old books and a ghost teaches you a magic spell for 10 minutes and then you're tapped out for a month. That's not a hero's toolkit. That's a rental library with a grudge. It's what I've got." "It's pathetic is what it is," said a voice from the tent flap, "and I say that with love, obviously." Hajar El-Zara ducked inside without waiting to be invited, which was the only way Hajar ever entered a room. There was a fresh burn mark on her sleeve and a look on her face that suggested the burn mark had been worth it. "You set something on fire," Milo said. "I set several somethings on fire. There was a supply dispute at the east checkpoint. It's resolved now." "Hajar." "It's resolved, Milo. No one died. One tent died. The tent had it coming. It was arguing with me." She dropped onto an overturned crate, swinging her legs. For just a moment, her eyes flicked to Kira's hand, to the faint gray shimmer still fading from her knuckles. Something under all that chaos went very still and very quiet before she covered it with a grin. "Anyway, you'll want to hear this. A scout just came in from the ridge. There's a portal." Milo stood up so fast his knees popped. "Where?" 2 kilometers out, Blue Gate, which I know before you say it. Blue means low danger, 5-person cap, 12-hour clock. It's not nothing, but it's not a meat grinder either." Hajar paused, and the pause was doing a lot of work. "Scout says there's writing carved over the archway, old-world script, the kind that shows up when a dungeon's core memory used to be a library." The tent went very quiet. Books meant knowledge. Knowledge meant power of knowledge, his one and only talent, the thing that made him useful instead of just another mouth in the ration line. And a library core dungeon meant books that hadn't been burned, banned, or buried by the people who decided 3 generations ago that letting anyone read the old manuscripts was the fastest way to lose control of the ones who did. "How long has it been open?" Milo asked. "About 20 minutes. Someone's already inside. A 2-person team, professionals, not locals. They're not sharing the find. They're just letting people know it's there so nobody stumbles in and messes up their run." Hajar's grin sharpened into something with teeth in it. "Which means if we want in, we've got a closing window and a line of very serious mercenaries who will not be thrilled to see 3 amateurs show up asking to borrow the library card." "We," Kira said from the cot, in a tone that made it very clear she had heard the pronoun and intended to argue about it. "You're staying," Milo said. "I'm 67% stone, Milo, not 67% dead. There's a difference. There's a 14% difference between those numbers, and I am not spending it watching you fight rats in a 12-hour dungeon." "I could." "Kira." He said her name the way he said things when he needed them to land and stay landed. Not shouted, just waited, the same voice he used on Arya when she tried something stupid and brave in the same breath. "You taught half this camp to purify water with nothing but a filter and a prayer. You are not spending whatever time you have left proving a point to me. Rest. That is the job today. Everyone has a job, and today resting is yours." Kira looked at him for a long moment, long enough that Hajar unusually said nothing at all. Then Kira exhaled through her nose, which from Kira was as close to surrender as the universe was going to get. "Bring me back a book, then," she said. "Something with a good ending. I'm running low on those." Arya Thorne was already outside the tent, sword Milo's spare. A plain, forgettable thing that dealt exactly 1d6 of damage and no more, strapped crookedly across her back because of course she was. She had a talent for materializing at the exact moment a plan involving danger started forming, like the universe kept casting her as a compulsory extra. "I heard dungeon," Arya said. "I heard library, I heard closing window. Please tell me I'm coming." "You're 14. I'm 15 next month, and you let me come to the last 3, so unless you're about to explain the very specific reasoning by which turning 15 retroactively makes the last 3 dungeons a mistake." "They were a mistake," Milo said. "I've simply chosen to live with my mistakes rather than repeat the exact same one on a schedule." "That's not a no." "It's not a yes either. It's—" and here it came. He could feel it rising in his chest like heat off a stove, the urge to explain, to contextualize, to reach back into the deep well of every myth he'd ever half memorized and pull out the right story. The one about the boy who wasn't ready and went anyway and either became a legend or a cautionary tale, depending on which version you were told as a child. And how the difference between those 2 outcomes was never luck. It was preparation. It was discipline. It was Milo, Hajar said, and the willingness to sit with discomfort instead of running from it, which is why the Icarus myth gets read wrong constantly. People think it's a story about ambition when it's actually a story about ignoring instruction, which is a completely different. Milo. Hajar grabbed his sleeve. "Clock, portal, mercenaries who are not going to wait for the moral of the story." He stopped, breathed. Looked at Arya, who had the exact expression of someone who had learned, through brutal repetition, exactly how long to let him run before the lecture became load-bearing to the conversation, and how long was just self-indulgence. "You're coming," Milo said. "You stay behind me. You do not touch anything that looks like it wants to be touched. If I say run, you run, and you do not look back to see if I'm running too. Would you?" "That's not the deal on offer." Arya's grin was smaller than Hajar's, quieter, but it had the same stubborn refusal to be talked out of anything underneath it. And Milo thought, not for the first time, that whatever god or system or cruel narrative logic had built this world, it had at least had the decency to hand him 2 people worth dying badly for. The blue portal sat in a shallow basin between 2 dead hills, exactly as advertised. An archway of frost-blue light stood in the center, cold enough that the grass 6 feet out had gone brittle and white. Its surface rippled like the top of a held breath. Runes ran along the inner edge of the frame, old-world script, the kind that got you executed for possessing in written form, but apparently got a free pass when the ruling class needed convenient monsters to keep the population scared and grateful for protection they'd never asked for. A mercenary in scavenged plate stood guard outside with the bored menace of a man who had done this exact job 40 times. He looked Milo's trio over. A teenage girl with a sword she clearly hadn't grown into. A woman radiating the specific chaos of someone who'd start a fight in a graveyard. And a man whose coat had seen better decades. The guard did not look impressed. "Squad's inside," the guard said. "2 spots left on the entry roster before cap. You want them, you're paying entry toll, standard rate." "We don't have coin," Milo said. "Then you don't have spots." Hajar opened her mouth. Milo could see exactly which sentence was queued up and exactly how much of the mercenaries' tent it was going to involve. He got there half a second before she did. "I have this," Milo said. He drew from his coat the one thing he never let out of arm's reach. A battered, water-stained page, torn from something older than the guard's grandfather, half a diagram of a healing sigil scrawled in a dead scholar's hand. Not a full manuscript, not enough to teach a phantom's lesson. But real, undeniably real. And the guard's eyes changed the second he saw it. Greed, mostly. But under the greed, something that looked almost like hunger for the same thing Milo felt every time he touched an original page, the ghost of a world where people had been allowed to know things. "That's not toll," the guard said slowly. "That's a keepsake. It's a spare page from a dead man's notes on cellular regeneration theory," Milo said. "You can sell it to any collector on the ridge for more coin than 3 entry tolls combined, or you can let 3 more people in on a countdown you're not using anyway and keep it as a bonus. Either way, you're better off than you were 90 seconds ago. I'm simply choosing to be honest about which option benefits you more. The guard looked at the page, looked at Milo, looked longest of all at Arya, who had the good sense to hold perfectly still and say absolutely nothing, which for Arya was practically a magic trick in itself. 12 hours, the guard said finally, snatching the page. Clock started when the first squad went in. You've got, he checked a battered pocket watch. 11 hours, 41 minutes left, and it does not pause for you being slow, sentimental, or dead. You go in, you find your own way, squad ahead of you owes you nothing. Understood. One more thing. The guard's voice dropped, and for just a second the bored menace fell away into something almost like a warning given out of genuine, tired decency. Library cores don't just drop books. Sometimes they drop the thing that wrote them. You go looking for knowledge in a place like this. Sometimes the knowledge is still awake, and it remembers exactly why it got buried in the first place. Milo thought about Kira's hand turning to glass one knuckle at a time. He thought about the 11 hours, 41 minutes ticking down whether he was ready or not, the same way crystallization didn't pause for anyone's readiness either. He thought about how every myth he'd ever loved was, underneath the metaphor, just a story about somebody walking toward the exact thing that could kill them because the alternative, staying safe, staying whole, staying comfortable, guaranteed a slower, uglier version of the same ending. Good, Milo said and meant it. I could use the company. He stepped through the cold blue light with Arya half a pace behind him and Hadger already grinning like the world had just gotten interesting again. The last thing he heard from the outside was the guard muttering something about amateurs. Then the frostlight swallowed the sound hole, and swallowed the sky, and swallowed the 11 hours and 41 minutes down to a number that had already, quietly, started to shrink.